Tuesday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are having a good one out there. Short week as it is, probably for a lot of you as well. I'm going to take part of the week off. I think there'll still be a Thanksgiving Day show just because there's enough content to warrant that. I want to be able to set up the Gophers-Badgers football game on Saturday. So I think I'll have Randy Johnson and his regular appearance happen on that Thursday show. But that'll be the last show of the week. No show Friday. And we'll take that through the weekend and come back on Monday. Good stuff today, though, and the rest of the week coming up in a little bit here. Andrew Krammer from the Tribune joins me to talk Vikings, talk that loss to the Broncos, what we saw in the film review. Joshua Dobbs, the running game was good. The turnovers were bad. What are we looking at? What might other teams copy? What might the Vikings be able to take with them the rest of the season based on what happened in that Broncos game? I have some Vikings poetry at the end of the show. I have a limerick as part of it this time, just to whet your appetite for poetry, which I'm sure you are ready for this week. Got some plenty of other stuff at the end of the show as well. Some news about a big hit Josh Dobbs took in that Denver game, and one of the coolest plays I've ever seen attempted in the Monday Night Football game on Monday is when the Monday Night Football game was played. Eagles beating the Chiefs in that game. A good game, rematch of the Super Bowl. Eagles taking that one, even though Kansas City was kind of in command for most of that game. Got a Wolves thought here in a minute. Shocking, right? First Wolves thought I've ever had. Not really exactly, but they are the first place team in the Western Conference. We got to get to them. Although we'll get to them a whole bunch more on Wednesday's show when Jeff Day from the Star Tribune joins me. We've been going back and forth on text messages, Slack, whatever, direct messages about Karl Anthony Towns for a while now, and I feel like it's probably time to have him on the show because Towns has been on the heater. He was good again, really good again in the win over New York on Monday night. We'll get to that here in a little bit, and then Jeff and I will go deeper on Towns and the state of the Wolves on Wednesday's show. First, though, what I miss, Joe Mauer on the Hall of Fame ballot. We knew this was coming. We knew he was Hall of Fame eligible this year, but ballot's officially out now. Voting taking place in the next month or two, and then the new class, the 2024 Hall of Fame class, will be announced early in 2024 in the induction over the summer. I don't know I've been torn on Mauer's candidacy pretty much ever since he retired, maybe even late in his career. You look at all the statistical evidence, the advanced stats, the kind of the 7-year peak. He is a Hall of Famer, right? Like Mauer at his best was as good as pretty much any catcher in the modern game and even the non-modern game. I mean, he is up there, top 5, top 10 catchers of all time in terms of his peak. The question I have is still, was his peak long enough? Did he do it for long enough? Does the 3 batting titles, the MVP, the unprecedented nature of those batting titles coming as a catcher, his defensive prowess, which we shouldn't forget at his peak, is that enough to offset the fact that it just wasn't for very long? It felt like it was for a decent amount of time. Like if you look at 2006 through 2013, he was really at the top of his game for almost all of those seasons. That's when he had all of his batting titles. That's when he was hitting 300 most years. Had the MVP year in 2009 coming back from that injury. Outside of that, though, he had some injuries leading up to that point. Kind of not a slow start to his career, but a wind-up that wasn't exactly full blazing. And then, the concussions, forced to first base later in his career, just didn't really have the last 5 years that he would have wanted or anybody would have wanted. So I look at that and I'm like, man, is Joe Mauer a Hall of Famer? No career postseason RBIs. No real signature moment in those kind of cases. No, you don't really think of Joe Mauer in that context. You think of him as steady excellence for a 7 or 8 year period. I think he's going to get in. I don't know if he's going to get in right away. I think his reputation is obviously great. What he did was great. he's such a fascinating Hall of Fame case to me. And, if you just look at it like the eye test, if you're like Joe Mauer, Hall of Famer, like you can have instincts all over the map. I just think he's going to be a fascinating case to watch. If I had a vote, I don't know if I would vote for Joe Mauer. And that's not a knock on Joe Mauer. It's just a looking at it over the course of his career. I'd have to think about it. I'm still torn about it. I still don't know what to make of this career 5 years after it ended and now that he's on the ballot. I just don't quite know how we properly evaluate what Joe Mauer did. The voters are going to do it. We're going to talk about this way more, I'm sure, in the next few months, but he is on the ballot now. That just announced this week. That became official this week. A fascinating test case, and we will hear more about that, I am very sure, over the next few months. The Wolves, like I said, red hot right now, 10-3. They were 1-2 at one point, means they're 9-1 in their last 10. They've yet to lose at home, 6-0 at Target Center, and they did it with offense, did it with defense, beat a good team, beat the Knicks. Knicks were red hot coming in. They'd won a bunch of games in a row. And the Wolves just looked good. Again, we're gonna get up to this point now where 13 games into the year. Okay, what's the sample size? When do you start believing that this is legit? It looks legit right now. Now, Jaden McDaniels hurt his ankle a little bit yesterday, so that'll be some depth to overcome. Karl Anthony Towns been on a real good roll, things like that. How long do they sustain this level? But right now, look at it. They're 10-3, best record in the Western Conference. Showing up in all of these lists. Like, hey, are the Wolves one of the 3, one of the 5 best teams in the NBA? Like right now, they're playing like it. Right now, they are playing like one of the 3, 4, 5 best teams in the NBA. And you look at the West and you say, okay, outside of Denver, which, Denver's the defending champs. Denver's still very good. The Wolves, yes, have beat them once this year, but Denver is still the team to beat until proven otherwise. Phoenix, awfully good. They're going to be fine once they sort it all out. But outside of those 2 teams, and really outside regular season, outside of Denver, who scares you in the West? Who do you think is going to be there at the end of the year? Who's going to have the body of work at the end of the year? You can make a real good case that the Wolves will be right there at the end of the year. Now, playoffs are an entirely different thing, right? Playoffs, everything is magnified. One bad game can ruin your whole season if you're not consistent, if you're not focused, things like that. This team has shown more consistency and more focus so far this season. And one thing that struck me when I was watching that Knicks game last night is that they've got these 3 max guys, and McDaniels got paid. They've got everybody on their roster right now is comfortable enough where they are individually in terms of compensation, in terms of what they were chasing contractually, right? Edwards got paid this offseason. Towns got paid the offseason before. Gobert's been paid for a while. Conley is a veteran who's made all his money. McDaniels got paid. Bench guys, Naz got his new deal. Anderson's got his money. I think there's something to be said for that. I think there's something to be said for not having to prove something as an individual in order to earn that new contract. I feel like there's maybe a relaxation and ease that comes with, okay, I did what I needed to do to set myself up for life and beyond. Now let's play better team basketball. I don't have to strain. I don't have to be the hero. I don't have to do this or that. I can just play basketball, play good team basketball. I don't know if that's why we're seeing this from the Wolves this year. Maybe it's just, year 2 maturity, things like that. But I feel like that's a part of it. I feel like it's an underrated piece of how sports work. Like when you arrive at that point, when you no longer have to feel like you're trying to achieve something individually, it unlocks what you're able to do as a team. And I think we're seeing some of that from the Wolves this year. And like I said, Jeff Day and I will get into it far more on Wednesday's show, talking about Towns and the ceiling for this Timberwolves team. But just something I was thinking about watching that game and where the Wolves are at right now, which is, to me, one of the 5 best, at least, teams in the NBA.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, Let your story begin.
All right, let's bring in Andrew Krammer to look back at the film. Vikings lose 21-20 against the Broncos on Sunday night. 5-game winning streak is over. Felt a lot like early in the year, Andrew, albeit with a different cast of characters on offense. Obviously no Kirk Cousins, no Justin Jefferson in this game, but the mistakes that they had largely been avoiding during the bulk of this streak, and certainly since Joshua Dobbs arrived, they all came back in this game against Denver.
Yeah, I think it's the fifth opening drive turnover for them this year.
Jeez.
And O'Connell mentioned after the game, it'd been a few weeks since we'd done that. Because you're right. They kind of seemingly grown past that, matured past that, and it reared its ugly head. And O'Connell he can't avoid the blame for that one. The 3rd-and-1 play call to put Dobbs in that situation in a game where you're already trying to Dobbs talked about, we challenged the offensive line before the game. We wanted to establish the line of scrimmage, establish the run, take it over. And you do this trick play on your first short yardage situation that gets the quarterback drilled. And actually, if you go back and watch the play too, it was just poorly blocked, poorly executed. It looked like a play that the players who were running it weren't comfortable with. Reisner misses the linebacker that leads to the initial hit on Dobbs, and then Dobbs gets chased down from behind by an edge rusher that Powell had pinned inside. But that all kind of comes together because they didn't block, and your quarterback doesn't hold on to the football. So, those issues start right from the get-go. Dobbs probably should have thrown an interception on the second drive. Yeah, but Justin Simmons drops it. And then, of course, they commit 2 more turnovers from there. And then just to go down the list, too, of stuff that you write down while you're watching this, 2 drop snaps, 7 penalties on offense. One of those were declined. Inaccurate passes from Dobbs, not firing those things on target, were allowing the receiver to run. There were certainly a couple plays there. And then he admitted at the end of the game, just poorly recognizing the blitzes that were coming that Denver sent. So there's certainly plenty of blame to go around. And it felt like this was kind of coming back to earth a little bit.
It did. I didn't love some of the design of stuff that was going on. I mean, they gained almost 400 yards. They ran the ball well, so it wasn't like the offense was bad. I felt like knowing kind of what Dobbs' strengths are, it felt like the Vikings were making him more of a pocket passer in this game than I remember him being in other games. Didn't feel like they were getting him out as much with a chance to kind of buy time, make plays. I mean, he did some of that on his own in the first half, but I just, the terrible 3rd-and-1 aside, I didn't feel like this was their best game plan going in.
Well, clearly what they wanted to do was, like we talked about, establish the run. They wanted to get Madison Chandler going, and they did that. I think it was in the first quarter was 67 rushing yards on the first 10 carries for those guys. Yeah. The Vikings average 86 rushing yards a game or something going into it. So they were doing that. And then the touchdown to Josh Oliver was a play action bootleg rollout where he's buying time, sheds a guy who tries to tackle him, and then finds that one. So you saw what they intended to do. And then I think as the game went along, Dobbs wasn't finding those throwing lanes down the field, and the play action dried up, and it turned into a shotgun kind of drop back game from there. And you just saw that Patrick Surtain, Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, who came back from a 2-game suspension. These Broncos defensive backs in the secondary is pretty underrated and pretty good. Entering the game, it gets kind of blown over because of the 70-point Dolphins debacle that they gave up. But entering the game, they were allowing a league low, I think, 17 points per game since that Dolphins game. So they've really turned it around and were playing well. And you got to credit Denver in that instance. But I do wonder why they didn't lean even more on the ground game. And I'm sure maybe Madison's fumble had something to do with that too in the third quarter.
And that was a killer. I mean, all 3 turnovers were tough. I mean, 2 of them in, fairly deep in their own territory. The defense does well in both cases to hold Denver to field goals. But the one where Madison fumbles, it's 17-9 Vikings at that point. They're going, they're in Denver territory, probably like in pretty close to field goal range, if not in field goal range already. And, it came at the end of a fairly successful kind of series of runs. Like, it felt like they were right on the verge of kind of taking control of the game at that point. You get points there in a game where points are hard to come by. You score a touchdown there, it's feeling like not like curtains, but like it could be, could be over. So yeah, it's just, I think they had to walk out of there frustrated, thinking we were the better team except for the turnovers, and that was very much an early season kind of feel based on how it happened.
Well, and especially for Alexander Mattison, if you just look at that play as a microcosm of his season, like it's been really disappointing, obviously. In a game where he's finally getting it going, it looks like, this is what it looked like against the Chargers and the Panthers earlier in the season. And yeah, the Broncos are a bad rushing defense. It's why the Vikings wanted to do this. Like, for as good as they are in the secondary, they're not good up front. They've traded away or cut everybody that was good for them in their front. And so they were able to control the line and run it. And Madison looked like, hey, this is the get back on track, rebound kind of game. And then he does that. And that's something where earlier in the season, he fumbled in Philadelphia. He put the ball on the ground twice against the Chargers that he got saved by the whistle because the play stopped. The coaching staff really challenged him after that. And then they traded for Cam Akers, and they said, well, look, we're not going to keep playing you if this keeps happening. And he had a good stretch where at least the ball security was there, even if the production wasn't. And then now you finally get the production and then the ball security. So it's disappointing for him. They really believed in him this season and thought he was going to, and maybe they still do. Maybe this isn't going to be some big sea change to Ty Chandler, but I really like the way Ty Chandler looked. And I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of people on TCO felt the same.
Yeah, although Chandler did some good things in the run game and did some okay things in the pass game, pass protection, but he also missed the block that led straight to that Dobbs interception where Dobbs gets hit. I think that was the play where, he's trying to catch a blitzing linebacker. It's a tall order. Like you're asking a lot of a running back to pick up a blitzing linebacker every time one-on-one, but you see maybe some of the steadiness that Madison brings, especially in that kind of situation. So it's like they don't have that kind of they don't have that perfect solution at running back right now.
No, you're right. They don't. And Madison, CJ Ham, these are much preferred third down options. I thought Ty Chandler did show some things, some good blocks, like you said, but the inconsistency is just going to be there. And the blocking was still inconsistent too. Like the running that they had to create, sometimes with Madison and one of his 15-yarders, I think 6 Broncos touched him. He was shedding guys left and right. And that was one of the third and short situations that they ran in. So nothing's really going perfectly for this offense. And I think through the Falcons and Saints wins, I know Vikings fans felt it of like, hey, we're winning by the seat of our pants here. And the things just didn't break your way this time. And O'Connell did say after the game too, our margin is not big enough to make those kinds of mistakes. They know they're not good enough with who they have available health-wise, talent-wise, to make those kinds of mistakes.
No, that's very true. And, maybe a little bit of reality caught up to Dobbs. It wasn't a bad game by any stretch, but it was his most mediocre game by far. I thought he played a good first half, and the NBC broadcasters are like making veiled references to Patrick Mahomes sometimes. I don't know if you caught that. I sure did. And it's like, all right, guys, slow down. But I get it. Like the playmaking, especially in the red zone, he's made 4 or 5 red zone plays that remind you of some of that elusiveness and improvisation, but he didn't really, like he said, didn't really pick up on a lot of those blitzes fast enough, especially in the second half when Denver did start coming at him, especially on that, the last 2 drives to hold the Vikings to a field goal when a touchdown could have really put the stamp on that game. Or, in that last minute drive when, realistically they were still in okay shape. You had a minute 3 timeouts. Like, in Denver, you need to get, probably 35 or 40 yards to have a real shot there, and they just didn't move the ball at all.
No, and I still think this offensive line kind of is the interior anyway, is who we thought it was. And you saw, you brought up Garrett Bradbury there on the last drive getting bowled backwards. I saw Dalton Reisner missing a lot of plays. Ed Ingram made some strong plays, but then also had some very, very negative plays where you lose quickly and get a play blown up. There were spots where Josh Dobbs is throwing off his back foot or getting hit or making some pretty incredible plays. The 29-yarder to Hawkinson comes down. We just lobbed the thing up in the air while couldn't step into it, was getting hit, and that's pressure from up the middle. The Broncos didn't need to blitz really much at all in this game, and they decided at the end, you know what, we're not going to risk it. we're just going to try and force the issue. And the Vikings weren't ready for it. And I think of the one second to last drive, red zone. It's a 3rd and 10. The Broncos just they do a zero blitz. They send everybody and just man up. And the Vikings didn't have an answer for it. Powell was kind of open over the middle, but by then Dobbs is kind of running for his life. And he said after the game, I need to do a better job at knowing where I'm going and sensing that pressure. And frankly, I think it caught everybody off guard.
So how do we evaluate this one then? Because they've got the Bears next week on Monday night, then they've got the bye week. Like, what more can they do at this point to kind of game plan and feel like, okay, now we have a counter to what other teams are doing versus treating this kind of like a one-off where it's like, we still scored 20 points and we turned it over 3 times. If we don't do that, we probably score in the mid-20s to 30 again and we're feeling good about ourselves.
Yeah, this is not, I really think that game in Denver is a spot where you miss Kirk Cousins. Like you miss, as great as Dobbs' mobility is, he's not as accurate. He's not going to fire into tight windows. He's not going to, and frankly, he's probably being coached to not take as many chances because of how inaccurate he can be. And you saw some of that. He
threw into some very tight windows that I would maybe prefer he didn't throw into on Sunday night.
Exactly. So maybe that's the correction off this game is do even less of that.
Yeah.
And I thought through the second half of that game, you saw him taking fewer chances when Justin Simmons almost intercepted him at the start of the game. So with Kirk, it was much more accurate. It was on time. It was in rhythm. It was hours and hours and months and years together to develop all that chemistry. And that means something when you're talking about, not being comfortable in Denver on prime time. And it's Patrick Surtain who's covering very well. It's Justin Simmons, it's Kareem Jackson. It's guys who are, again, very good at what they do in that secondary. And you still don't have Justin Jefferson. So I think the key for them is going to be developing a plan around Justin Jefferson for the stretch run of this season and figuring out how you can use him in ways that lean into Dobbs' mobility and try to get the numbers advantage with his with the threat of his legs. And with Justin, it's not going to be the 20-yard shots on the dig routes downfield all the time, firing into tight windows that Kirk did. It's going to have to look different. And that's, we've seen this coaching staff evolve this offense so far. And I think that evolution is going to have to continue.
Yeah. And there was some quick passing game in terms of 8-yard curls and stuff like that. They didn't seem to do a whole lot of, kind of some of that, behind the line of scrimmage stuff. The screen game wasn't really clicking in this game, although I suppose some of that's if the Broncos are only rushing 3 or 4, the screen's not going to be effective. But it felt like I'd like to see Addison and Powell get the ball in their hands and just do some running with it instead of forcing Dobbs to make as many decisions as he's had to make.
And we saw some of that. Powell had a 22-yarder catch and run against the blitz when the Broncos brought it. One of the few times they brought it earlier in the game. We saw Ty Chandler had a 7-yard screen in the red zone. So we saw a little bit of that. And honestly, look, if we're talking about a game where the Vikings only commit 4 penalties on offense, only drop 1 snap, and maybe only commit 2 of the 3 turnovers. Yeah. We're talking about a win and saying, boy, isn't this all incredible? So I think what we probably have left unsaid too is that the defense played very, very well, kept them in this game until a bad ending with a rookie corner who was replacing a starter who had been playing pretty well. And let's be honest, if a Caleb Evans at 6'2" were covering Cam Sutton, who's 6'3" on that play, it's probably a different outcome too than the 5'11" Mekhi Blackman. The Broncos saw that matchup, took advantage of it. That is what ended up being a big difference maker, along with all the miscues on offense that we're talking about.
And the curse of Russell Wilson returns.
Yeah, that's right. The curse of Mike Zimmer's long gone, but that curse is still here.
It is. Well, we'll see what happens next week. Vikings at Bears on Monday night, which probably means this segment will at least be a day later. Andrew, happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you soon.
You too, Mike. Thanks.
Postscript to my conversation with Andrew. Thanks again for hopping on. Andrew Krammer. Kareem Jackson, who hit Josh Dobbs helmet to helmet, not called a penalty during the game. 4-game suspension for that hit and repeated violations of player safety rules. It was announced on Monday. Still can't believe that wasn't called anything on the field. That was the play that Dobbs fumbled on, He went to be evaluated in the concussion tent, came out okay, but man, that was a brutal, vicious hit, and justifiably, given that 4-game suspension, it was his first game back after another suspension. He's been in all sorts of trouble this season with the league for the way he's been playing. So, a 4-game suspension for Jackson, and well deserved in that case. Poetry time on Daily Delivery, where
woo!
Not to spoil it, but I've been promised 2 different types of poetry on this edition. I've been told there's 2 haikus and a limerick. A little worried about the limerick, wondering if I'm going to have to get out the beep button. You never know. We'll see. Keith or Shot, am I going to have to get out the beep button?
When have you ever had to? Don't censor me, man. Don't you tell me how to write poetry.
Well, two haikus and a limerick are about what that game against the Broncos would deserve. So please, sir, haiku number 1.
Are we blessed or cursed with modern technology? Just shut up, iPad.
Now, what are you talking about there?
So, as you know, as we've talked about many times, I try to avoid the game and the score.
Yeah.
Because I can't watch it till later.
Yeah.
And last night I thought it'd be easy, right? Because it's a late game.
Right.
But it was right in the middle of my old man hockey game.
Right.
But
which
I'm
I've
at
been
my
to.
old man.
Yeah, which I've been
yes.
to. I know.
Right.
I know all about it.
And so I went to my old man hockey game, played the game, a little frustrated, scored a goal, but a little frustrated. Whatever. We're not going to get into it. Okay. And so I get home and I get myself all showered up, cleaned up. I'm going to sit there and I'm easy to avoid this game, right?
Yep.
And then I get my iPad because I'm going to watch it. And then the iPad pops up. Final score, Vikings 20, Denver 21. It's just like, you stupid piece of technology, you dumb, stupid. Like, this is the one thing I did not want to know. And now you're telling me this. Why are you telling me this? I don't want to know this.
I can't watch a game with that when I know the score. I mean, I can, I guess, if like I really want to watch it, if something good happened or something, but if I know the score, it's ruined.
Yeah, so all of which is to say I just watched the highlights.
That's
somehow managed to make myself just watch the highlights, but it's so are we better off, right? We live in a world where we cannot escape. Unless we go to incredible extremes, we cannot escape this information. We cannot allow ourselves to have space like this anymore. And it's made worse because we are further incentivized to have this technology. We're getting to the point where we can't live without it.
Yes.
That I can't walk into a sporting event with an actual paper ticket anymore. Everything's on the phone always, all the time.
Yes.
And so let's not forget, maybe there's some folks who still maybe are a little uncomfortable with spending that much money on a phone, right? What do they have to do in life? But we're stuck with this technology that's constantly in our face, and we don't even get time to breathe, and it makes me so angry. And this game was ruined, which I guess at least I got to go to sleep a little earlier, I suppose.
Yeah, if anything was going to get ruined, this was a good one because it was frustrating. It was a game the Vikings kind of had until they didn't. It felt very much like an early in the year game. We'll give them an occasional one like this. And we do have to remember they had won 5 in a row without Justin Jefferson. So maybe we can't be too mad about that. But I'd be mad if I was you. I still remember you and I trying to avoid an Olympic hockey score from like 30 years ago when the U.S. was actually like making a weird little run. Was it 92? When the Winter Olympics would have been?
It was 94.
94. It was 94. Must have been 94, yeah.
Yep.
And we're trying to avoid, so that'd have been our senior year, trying to avoid a hockey score because then they're playing in the middle of the day, but like who would know? Who would tell us? There's no phone to tell us. Like it would just be like some teacher who got excited about it and was trying to tell us in the middle of the day, and you wanted to go home and watch it later.
Right. And you can't do that anymore.
No.
You talk about spoiler alerts, all that kind of stuff, but whatever. And it's a big joke, but it's also honestly true. You cannot avoid the glut of information, even if you want to. And it's just depressing that this has to be in your face all the time.
And I can barely watch a game with social media open because the feed is like 30 seconds earlier than my TV feed, because anyone who's at the game is going to be seeing everything a little bit before the TV feed, and my streaming feeds a little bit behind that. Like there have been times, multiple times this year where like someone will like rave about something. I'm like, that hasn't happened yet for me. And that's annoying.
I can imagine so. And as somebody who doesn't have social media, I'm more thankful each and every day. Anyway, number two.
And I'm more thankful every day that you don't have social media. Number two.
I think the whole world is more thankful I don't have social media.
Number two, you have anti-social media. Number
That's
two, please.
very, very anti-social media. All right, number two. Just puppets of fate. Free will is an illusion. Enough turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, we thought we'd solve this problem, right? Thought we'd solve the problem, and it's, I don't know, like the first one where Dobbs fumbled, like that was a terrible play call, first of all. I don't know what they're trying to do there. And he gets a helmet-to-helmet hit. They don't call that, so whatever. And the interception, his arm gets hit while he throws, like that's going to happen. The Madison fumble just bothered me because I know fumbles are going to happen, but like they were in control of that game right until that fumble. So, but yeah, 3-0 turnover battle. You can't win that way. You can't win that way, even though they almost did.
So I'm merely somebody who comments on football games I don't watch. You're the one who watches these football games. You tell me how many games would they have won if they had even had one less turnover this year?
I mean, I feel like it was a problem for like 3 or 4 games in a row at the start of the year. Like the Tampa Bay game, I feel like they win that game if they win the turnover battle or even have 1 or 2 fewer turnovers. I feel like the Chargers game, it was still an issue. I don't think they win the Eagles game, probably even if they are better in that regard. But like there have been 2 or 3 games this year. I think we're being not ungenerous to say that if they'd been like a marginally better turnover team, they'd be 7-4 right now at least instead of 6-5. And they've been better lately. This was like a callback to a worse time, but I think they'd at least be 7-4 if they were better with the turnovers. Now, Josh Dobbs will turn the ball over a little bit too. Let's not forget about that. He's lost, I think, 3 fumbles. He had the interception in this game. Can't remember if he'd been picked before this one.
You keep your dirty talk about Josh Dobbs out of your mouth.
Okay.
Okay.
You still love him? You still love him?
Well, without having watched the game, I certainly did.
The highlights were great.
They were amazing. That touchdown pass was just incredible.
Yeah,
absolutely incredible. He was like 20 of 32 or something like that, or 36.
Yeah, his game was good. His first half was very good. His first like 2.5 quarters were really good, and then the blitz and stuff caught up to him.
So I mean, I'm just saying I have an affinity for the guy, and I want to see where he goes. And it's gonna happen every now and then, right? You are gonna have these turnover games every now and then. I'm still so angry about that 2009 NFC Championship.
Second week in a row. They lost to Sean Payton, so this is the second week in a row that you can bring that up.
I hate that guy so much. Just hate him. So 5 turnovers. If they had only given up 4 turnovers in that game, they would have gone to the Super Bowl and won it.
Yes.
If they had just been 0-4 in the turnover category, they would have won that stupid game. Yes. And it just drives me insane. But it's going to happen every now and then.
Right.
But you're right. Early in the season, that's all that seemed to be happening, right? So this is not an every now and then. This is a lot. And
it's frustrating because they were definitely a better team than Denver. And they just, when you lose the turnover battle, you just negate all of those advantages. Okay, dare I even ask, what's the limerick?
All right, here we go. It's time to pause and take stock. It's like banging your head against a rock. No, let me finish. I can't stop hating. Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. Sack of lemons.
Well, I
couldn't. The problem is I couldn't think of a word that rhymes with stock and rock. I think those 2 words only rhyme with each other. Yeah. So I had to sort of improvise there. But I hate them both, and I hope they.
I couldn't think of anything either.
Yeah. They just those are there. Aaron Rodgers. Okay, Aaron Rodgers is his own class, right? Yeah, Aaron Rodgers is his own class. But if we put him aside, has there been 2 more hateful people in Vikings history over the last 15 or so years
than Sean Payton and Russell Wilson? I mean, Payton with 2009, and Russell Wilson's beaten them like so many times. They finally beat him once, like a few years ago, I think.
One single time.
And he's come back on them a few times. He had that stupid playoff win, the 10-9 Blair Walsh game. That's a good question. Who are the most? They're up there. They're in the top 5 for sure. I don't know who else I'd put in that category, but they are definitely in that mix. I agree with that.
I can't think of anybody else. I mean, again, Aaron Rodgers is his own thing or whatever. If we just sort of put him to the side, I am not sure that there are 2 people who have tortured this team more in the last 15 or so years than those 2. And now that they're together and they did it again, it's just hateful and angry and stupid and wrong.
Give them the lemons. Are those guys the most hated in the last 15 years? If you're a Vikings fan, I was struggling to find anyone else who really jumps into that category. Unlike Aaron Rodgers certainly is in that category, but if you have other names of players from this past 10 to 15 year era that rise to that list for you, find me on social media at Randball. Find me on email, michael.rand@startribune.com. Find me and let me know what you think, because I'm struggling to come up with anybody else who fits that category. Let us finish with the cooler, by the way. Like I said at the jump, the Eagles won 21-17 over the Chiefs. Everybody buzzing about Marquez Valdes-Scantling dropping what would have been the winning touchdown, 50-yarder or so in the closing 2 minutes. Chiefs lose, though. Another thing people are buzzing about, one thing that I just absolutely loved from this game, Eagles defensive tackle Jalen Carter tried to intercept a Patrick Mahomes spike when Patrick Mahomes was trying to just clock the ball with late in the half, trying to just stop the clock. There was a play where Jalen Carter, defensive tackle for the Eagles, jumped through, basically dove underneath the center's legs and tried to intercept the spike, and he almost got it. It kind of went right through his hands. He said he saw it on the internet, said he saw that tried on the internet. Maybe the internet is good in some ways. I don't know. Maybe that's the one way the internet is good, but I thought that was one of the coolest plays. I hope this becomes a thing. I hope this becomes something where other guys are trying it now, where teams have to be cautious of it so that, guys aren't just throwing it softly into the ground, things like that, because that would be the coolest kind of interception. A team is just trying to spike the ball to maybe set up a game-winning field goal, and nope, the nose tackle shoots through and catches the spike, and that would be really cool. But he tried it, didn't quite get it, but I hope this becomes a thing and someone gets one somewhere down the line. Speaking of somewhere down the line, that'll do it for me today. Back at it tomorrow with Jeff Day talking Timberwolves, Randy Johnson on Thursday show talking Gopher football. Until then, I'm Michael Rand. We'll talk to you then.